donkey.
Why does it have to be moo cows and goats?
Put a saddle on a beast and ride it into the sunset. Something like that. Right?
Okay.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to BackTalk. Sans Mr. Vassal.
Yes. The cat's away, so the mice will play. Yes.
He is on a trip. That's why he's not here. He's fine. He's alive.
Yes.
Not stuffed in a drawer or anything.
No, we wouldn't do that.
It's fake hardcore. It's like mathcore.
He just learned that term just a few seconds ago.
And I laughed. Mathcore. Back to school.
Math core.
All right, so today we're going to be talking about, basically we're talking about something that Tom, one could say, is guilty of. And since he's not here, he can't defend himself. So you know what? He is guilty of it.
Absolutely.
And that is owning too much. I could say. Yeah, you could say too much.
Too much.
For a single game. That's what we're going to be talking about.
One singular game.
And the game we are choosing to highlight, i.e. the intervention game, is going to be Heroescape.
Heroescape.
Now, from what we gathered, we attempted to find Tom's Heroescape goodies. It seems they've been stashed away. They must be hidden somewhere.
He's definitely disposed of some of the evidence.
Right. It's just not here. But there are remnants of it.
Yes.
So we've got some things here to show you, okay? So for example, here you go, Sam. That's going to be for you.
Yes. Yes, got it.
And in this one, you're going to find some flora.
Flora.
He's got basically
of
trees.
All kinds of different...
all sorts of weird trees.
Things.
That you use to build your maps there.
Would you like to make some ladders?
Nice. And then over here I got another one, and this one's going to feature some terrain. You know, pretty standard stuff, except this one happens to be in red. It's not normally red.
Lava. The floor is lava.
So it's like, you know, it's kind of like hardened lava a little bit, sort of solidifying.
This stuff looks like it belongs in a
diorama.
No, in a
I saw some of this
fish bowl.
At the museum. That too. Got some more here, and then over here we got some mountains as well, some snowy peaks as well.
This isn't Heroescape. This is just something he bought.
Oh, it's Heroescape now.
I know.
And that kind of highlights the what we're talking about here. Some more mountains and so forth. So again, there's quite a bit in there. No! Now, besides that, we've also got over here some bins with the characters. These have all the characters. Like some people would keep CD players in the 90s. Tom's got
and that's just one case.
This is one. There's another one right next to it. And again, this is tip of the iceberg here, folks. There is a lot more of this stuff where, I don't know where, somewhere where the shame can be hidden. I'm kidding, all right? Don't bite me.
Yeah, we're really, this is tongue-in-cheek, but it's a good way to, oh, you didn't show that.
Oh, yeah, this is fun.
This is just, now, you know, I think it's the Rise of the Valkyrie set. It has the castle.
That's right.
This is just the tippy tops of the castle.
The ramparts.
So that should tell you exactly how much of the castle parts that he has. Because this is just the stuff that goes on top of the castle.
That's what Gimli hides behind, yeah.
Yes! Would you like me to explain it to you? Or
would
get
you like
a box?
chair or a box or something, yeah.
So, yeah.
Anyway.
There's a lot of stuff.
There's a lot of stuff. And so we figured we would talk about that a little bit, you know, and things like how much is too much for a really single game, right? At what point do you need to play a game enough where you feel justified that you have that much of it? And also, do you even have that as a problem? Do you see yourself as someone who is simply collecting that stuff?
Yeah.
And that's okay because you don't feel that drive, that, you know, pseudo guilt to get that stuff that you paid money for played. You know, how deep can you go? And then also, there is the opposite thing, which is getting too many games, right? I mean, there's like always the idea of like having 80 games in that shelf of shame that we call it that you haven't played yet. That's a slightly different issue. We're not really going to be scraping on that one too much. We want to dive into this, having one game, getting a lot of it. Now, the common issue these days is, of course, Kickstarter.
Right.
Kickstarter, they're like, they show you 87 different tribes for whatever the new miniature game is, and you're like, oh man, I need 87, I need 88. Where's that 88th unlockable one?
Yeah.
And you back them all.
Wow.
And you play with 6 of them. But it's because, partly, you probably can't get that stuff later on.
True.
So they bank on that, right?
There's a little bit of limited availability with it. But I mean, seriously, man, I've seen some people's pictures of their Kickstarter projects that they backed, and there are literally like 8 to 10 boxes of stuff that have shown up at their door. And I mean, it's just all over the place. It's like a board game hemorrhaged inside your living room or something like that.
Disgusting. I love it. Now, someone here, Philip, brings up a point that the way he does it is by assigning a dollar value to hour played. In this case, he says $25.
Yeah.
So $25 per hour played, and I feel good. Those are pretty good, by the way. That statistic is very forgiving, seeing as to how a game that's, say, $50, let's call it, you're probably going to be able to play that. Let's say it's a fairly meaty game, a couple hours. One play. That's one play. You've justified that purchase.
Yeah.
That's probably more forgiving than most people.
Yes. I was just thinking that actually. That seems like you're leaning on justifying the purchase rather than justifying the time spent with the purchase, because you can play a 2-hour game that costs $50. You play it once, okay, I'm justified. I have. So that seems a little lightweight as far as I'm concerned. I might want to get it a little bit closer to. I mean, I've used it before, and I think we all have in some way, shape, or form. Is how much does it cost to go to the movies? How long does that movie cost?
That's the one, yeah.
So the movie costs, let's say, on the high end, maybe $12, $15 a ticket. It takes 2 hours, so you've got $7 to $8 invested in that movie, that experience, not including snacks, which really kind of makes the thing skyrocket. So I would say probably around $10 an hour would probably be a better estimation as far as general entertainment value and justification for that.
Yeah, and I think that's a little closer. Now, again, we're not saying here you need to justify your purchases. If you consider yourself a collector, you've got the income, do it.
Yeah.
It's fine. We just wanted to talk about this a little bit, the idea of, because it all comes back down to feeling a little bit guilty that you bought too much for something.
Right.
If you're not feeling that way, you're good. If you're not keeping food from anyone's mouths, you're not having to shut off the heat because you couldn't make that payment this month.
Right.
If everything's good, go for it. Even if you're not playing that stuff, it makes you happy just to own it, go for it. What we're talking about is, and this happens, when you buy something, you bought too much of it, maybe you keep going back to the well for whatever this thing is because there's a bunch of expansions, and eventually you go from an enjoyer of this thing to a sufferer of it. Eventually you're like, man, you look at your shelf, and there's a base game, 8 expansions, and you start to feel bad about getting that much.
Right.
That's what we're talking about. So where do you draw that line, and how do you combat that feeling? That feeling of, I got too much, I kind of feel guilty. Obviously you want to try to play it. That's sort of, the obvious answer to that, get that stuff played. That's not always possible to get it all played. So I'm curious what you think. At that point, do you start justifying things like, I just like to take this game off the shelf and kind of mess with it for a while. I'm not playing it, but I'll reread the rule book. I'll set up a little terrain, take some pictures of it, I start just kind of like messing with it.
Yeah.
And that, kind of alleviates that unease a little bit. I myself have done that plenty. I love to do that. I love to pull something out again I haven't messed with in a while and just read it again and kind of, set it up, remind myself how it all goes if I have the time to do it anyway. And that can be fun. That can be part of the enjoyment of the hobby, I think. It's perfectly valid.
There's a couple things that I want to touch on here before they scroll past. The first thing is, let's see here. Where is it? Oh, it already scrolled. Let me see here. Oh, man.
Somebody said Jason equals no guilt. And that's true, but also he's a collector, I would say. There's no denying that.
Yeah.
It's not hurting his bottom line, and he enjoys owning this stuff. That's okay. That's where his joy comes from, is owning this stuff, and there's nothing wrong with that. Amanda says $10 an hour is a good rate. I would say I agree with that too.
Here's one thing somebody said: is the $10 an hour include painting if it has miniatures in it for me or for somebody else that has painting? Sure. I mean, it's talking about entertainment value. It's not talking about actual playtime.
Right.
So I think that's a little bit more relevant, I guess you could say. Trevin Taylor says, no, movies charge per person, games don't. Change the analogy to multiple tickets. I'm not really talking about a full-on analogy here. I'm talking about just an idea of how I'm going to gauge entertainment value and the money that I attributed to it for myself. I'm buying a ticket for myself to the movie, so I am investing, whatever, $8-10 an hour.
And we know those are low.
Yeah,
most movies say like
whatever.
New York or something, you're looking at $14 or whatever.
Correct.
We know it's more in many other places, but that's fine. You can use that number too. Yeah, that's a good point. And again, we're picking an arbitrary number just because movies are about 2 hours.
Yeah.
And for you to go see one when it comes out, that's where you go to do it. You're going to have to pay those $14,
Another one, Seth says, I feel my problem is that I have so much of a game, the less it gets played because of sorting. An example he gives is he has everything from Memoir 44, and it takes so long to sort to play one game, and so it makes him want to play it less.
Sure. So, you get this sort of, it's not what we call analysis paralysis, but it's a version of that in which the more you have of something, the more it freezes you upon reaching for that game, and you go, wait, I have 6 expansions for this. I'm going to teach it to new people, so I probably have to remove those, but maybe I could leave that one in, because that one's pretty easy. You start to clutch up, So my solution for that, especially when it's a Kickstarter, is if I've got a Kickstarter, I got some extra stuff in there, I don't even worry about that stuff until I'm pretty familiar with that game. And then it serves a double purpose, which is you set it aside, unopened if possible, but you might have to open it and check it for, make sure everything's in there. You set that stuff aside, out of mind. And then later on down the road, when you bring that back out, A, you already paid for it, so it doesn't feel like you bought something new, right? B, you add freshness to the game. You bring something in when you are already familiar with everything else that's in there. So it feels like a new gift, a new thing. And C, you haven't been staring at it on the shelf, bugging you. That guilt of like, man, I bought all this stuff and I haven't used it.
Right.
Did I really need to pay all that money up front?
Yeah.
So that's how I do it. Just kind of an out of sight, out of mind mentality for me. And that eases that uneasy feel.
Now, I will say in Tom's defense slightly here that he does use HeroScape to play with his family a lot. Well, I don't know about a lot, but he does talk about it over the course of the year multiple times.
Sure.
About how he and his daughters will set something up and we'll play it and they'll leave it set up and then they'll take it down a couple days later. So, we're not coming down hard on Tom or anything. We're just using this kind of as a launching point into the discussion. But
we just picked the thing. This is like we said, pretty tongue-in-cheek.
So it's just you have to have a point at some way, unless you have unless you're fortunate to have this unending fountain of money from somewhere. There has to be a point at which you are able to say, okay, enough is enough, or I have too much, no more.
I really do think though that's not the worst thing. Isn't the running out of money thing is bad, obviously, and most people, I think, are smart enough to not do it. I think the pressure point really comes from having games you're not playing. That makes most people feel bad. Having acquired a game that then sits on your shelf, gathering dust, slowly mocking you over time, that you bought this thing, and you're not using it. This money could have gone towards anything. Now, I'm not saying that buying a meal would have been any better, but you would have enjoyed that meal immediately, is my point. If your enjoyment comes from merely owning that thing, then you're one of the lucky ones, that's okay. Now, a lot of people aren't like that. A lot of people don't feel like they've enjoyed a board game until they've played said board game. So that's more what we're talking about here. Where is that threshold between really content to own something and happy but slightly guilty that I own so much of that thing? And we're not saying that Tom feels like that. We're just, again, kidding. And how you fight against that feeling, That's tricky for many people. And a lot of people don't have regular game groups. A lot of people aren't able to bring this stuff to the table all the time in any case, even if you have a game group, because everybody's got their own gaming agenda in some ways. Everybody's suffering from it. So that's what I'm talking about. Now, a lot of games out there now have solitaire play modes. And it seems to be a big, big push.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the absolute first questions that gets asked on Kickstarter, I swear, for just about anything, is there a solitaire game mode? And I think it's partly because of that.
Yeah.
People who want to get these games, you want to dive right into it, play solitaire, You don't have to depend on someone. You don't want to have that money there slowly rotting away on the shelf. And that's part of it. So that's a good way.
April says, honestly, I aim more for $1 per hour per game.
And that's
$1 an hour per game. Hopefully, eventually, I play that game as many hours as dollars spent. Of course, there are exceptions. I don't know that we would be able to do that.
Oh, no.
With
us. I mean, we are in a different situation. Right. That's a given, That's not a great comparison, but that's really low. Yeah.
So it leads into other questions. Other people are cropping up other questions, like at what point do you start trimming the size of your collection then? And it really depends. I think it really depends upon your own specific situation. I mean, right. if your shelf of shame outweighs games played, then you might want to think about the fact that you might not be a board gamer. You might be a board game collector.
Yeah, and that's fine.
Yeah,
that's going to take a little adjustment in how you perceive yourself, I think space definitely is a big one. And just, if you are starting to think, man, I got to let go of some games, you're getting some pressure from something. You know what I mean? Like your brain is going, hey, dork, you own too many games.
Yeah.
What's the best way to know if you need to trim some games? Because you feel like you do. I think that's the best way to do it. If you're starting to feel like, you look through the shelves, A, you don't know what to pick to bring to game night, probably because you own too many games. And B, if you're starting to feel like you got to let some games go, then you probably got to let something go.
Yeah.
And once you do get rid of something, and that sort of, detachment passes, it does feel good oftentimes to lighten the load a little bit, but it is hard to do.
Eric Burden says, how long will you keep a new game before you would consider getting rid of it if you're not playing it? So how long does it stick around? Even though you know it's not being played, how long do you allow it to sit there?
Yeah, that's a good question.
On your shelf. I think it really depends upon it goes from case to case, I think. For example, I own TI4. It hits the table maybe once a year.
Right.
Is that enough to keep TI4 around? Yeah, I think so, because I enjoy the game that much.
Right.
But something else like, I don't know, I can't think of a game off the top of my head, but if another game gets played once a year, that's not enough. And it's got to go because it's only got played once. So it really depends upon a lot of other factors that I can't really enumerate for you, or not enumerate, but enunciate for you, because there's too much there. There's too many factors at play.
TJ Norn over here says something funny, not really related to what we're talking about, but he says, I got the feeling that you guys get a lot of complaints with your videos. Tom always says, just to clarify. What's the main reason behiin him always feeling the need to clarify?
Because of the internet. That's why. Because of the internet.
Yes, there's a lot of complaints. I always attempt to say that anything I say is in my opinion, but every now and then I still need to actually verbally say that.
Yep.
Because I guess it isn't obvious enough. If I say it, It's in my opinion, unless I'm quoting a statement.
Right.
Kabuki Kid says you can also be a gamer and a collector at the same time, and that's true. You know, absolutely, you can be, and most people are. Honestly, I doubt that there's anyone out there who collects board games who would then not play them whatsoever. They just identify more with being a board gamer.
I think there's
a rare thing to start collecting out of the blue if you're not a gamer.
Well, I think there's an old, I don't know if it's a Native American proverb or something to that effect, but it has to do with how you identify with yourself and what wolf you feed the most. You know, if you have this dichotomy of being a gamer and a collector, well, how much gaming do you do as opposed to how much collecting do you do? Mm-hmm. So which wolf are you feeding the most? And that is probably where you're going to fall on what your identity actually would be between those two. You know, if it's, you know, if you buy games once a month and you go gaming 4 times a month, oh, I think that would probably, sure, you collect games, but you're a gamer.
Right.
Do you collect games 4 times a month, or do you collect games once a month, and that one purchase is enough for like somebody else's 4 or 5 months?
Right.
And you only play games, you know, a couple times throughout the month. That helps you identify which side of the coin you might be falling on.
And something else that happens to me, and this is a big trap, which I suspect I'm not the only one that falls into this trap, is that I have a few different hobbies, and as I cycle through them, if I get into something, I will inevitably stumble upon deals for that type of thing, and then I get more of it.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, every now and then I'll be playing a video game, which is fairly rare for me. I don't play that many video games. But if I get into one, then I will inevitably see a deal where you can get this other role-playing game or shooter game or racing game for like $6. I'm like, well, you know, but as I'm making a dent in the backlog, I keep adding to it.
Yeah.
You know, I would read a novel and then go to Barnes & Noble and buy 2 of them. It's like, well, you're never going to, you know, if I keep doing this, I'm never going to push through what I've got to do now, what I've got sitting there that hasn't been read or played or painted or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. That's a tricky thing to fight that off. You know, I think avoiding looking at possible deals is a good way to do it. There's always going to be deals. That's the thing.
Right.
There are always deals. There is simply too much for you to consume everything. You will not play every game. You will not read every book. You're not going to enjoy every video game. And there always is one on sale that looks good. So do the best you can to just avoid looking at deals. Mm-hmm. You know, it happens. If you go shopping, you will find stuff. So I think that's a big part of it.
Eric asks, is Jason a collector or a player? And again, you would have to ask Jason that question. But I mean, Jason will play a game at the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
And he will drive 45 minutes to an hour if you ask him to come play games with you. So I definitely would consider Jason a player. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, he has been known to purchase games at an amazing rate. But that's because he has a job that allows him to do that.
Right.
I mean,
he feels good with it.
We're not talking bad about Jason here. It's just that, or Tom for that matter, or anybody else really. We're just simply breaching the topic, I guess you could say, because you do need to talk about it to keep yourself in check sometimes.
Yeah.
Somebody asked, Serial Hero says, does Sam ever keep games with nice minis with the intention to paint them even if the game is bad? And the answer to that is no. Sometimes I will keep the miniatures just because I like the way they look, but I won't keep the entire game. Which that might be anathema to some of you out there because I'm basically cannibalizing the game, and nobody's going to play that copy of the game anymore because I've kept the minis and I've gotten rid of the rest of it. So you'll probably disagree with part of that, but no, I don't keep a game just because it has nice miniatures. Matter of fact, most of the time if I'm painting anything, it's not even for me. It's for other people. So in some type of a charity, whatever. So no, I don't keep games that have nice minis just because I might paint them sometime in the near future. Because probably won't.
Right. And yeah, if you are able to find that honesty, it's going to do you favors, Anyway, let's go ahead and take some questions, folks. Why don't you send us in some questions here?
Yeah.
We've been talking for a while. Let us know what you're thinking, some of how you tackle this, and just sort of what's on your mind right now. Someone says, true stories. I have enough games right now and decided to work through my shelf of shame before I buy any more. There are games I really, really want, but I know they will still be there in 6 months. They will. There is that fear of missing out, but they're it's 99% chance that, yes, you can get it in 6 months if you really, really want it, Someone else said, actually, a little earlier that we should retire the term shelf of shame and call it the shelf of opportunity.
Yeah.
I get that. I understand. Again, I think it's largely a tongue-in-cheek term, not to be taken particularly seriously.
Correct.
If it is causing you particular shame, you probably wouldn't post pictures of it. So, it's all right. All right, what else we got here?
All right, Kabuki is just rearing that ugly head again. I'm still blown away. Sam picked Time Stories as a themeless game.
Oh, we're talking about that, huh?
Oh, my goodness, people. Look, I know 2 years ago I put it on a Themetastic list, number 4. Not number 1, by the way. And yeah, my opinion has changed over the last 2 years. Shocking. Yeah, I see the construct as being themeless that can have themes applied to it, which is where all the modules come in.
Right.
So you can disagree. That's fine. It's all right. It's okay for you to be wrong. It's fine.
All right, David says, what ultimately sways your decision to buy a game on Kickstarter? Honestly, for me, part of it is that fear of missing out. Obviously, it has to look good, too. I don't care if the game looks bad, but it's also exclusive to Kickstarter. Then I don't care, But if it looks good, and if it sounds like it's going to be up my alley, and it's also going to be something that's fairly rare, I'd be lying if I didn't say, yeah, it kind of helps. Mm-hmm. It kind of gets in your brain, and it makes you do things, crazy things, wild things. Anyway, yeah, that's part of it, sure.
Game cafes help me stop. Amanda Panda says, game cafes help me stop buying because I can play them there. It's cheaper and I don't have to worry about storage. That's a good thing, but not everybody has a game cafe right around the corner. Did I see the announcement from Mythic on their next game, Hell? A Viking theme that certainly will come with way too much stuff. That's probably true. But I believe I've seen it. I can't remember specifically, but it triggers something in my mind. What is my opinion on Keyforge? I enjoy it. It's a fun game. And I like the specific nature of it, how all of the different decks are very individualized and not copies of other ones. And I like that. So and the gameplay is also fun as well. So that's good.
All right, we got entropyguardian here. Says, I just sold off about 40 games, bunch of redundant stuff. Got rid of code names because I have crosstalk. Got rid of crosstalk because I got decrypto. And that's a good way to do it. That's certainly one of my favorite ways to attempt to lighten the load, so to speak. Is there stuff that would fit the same target audience, same length, same part of the brain that gets activated? Then you might not need them all. Now, having said that, there are things you'll gravitate towards. Like I have a bunch of co-ops. Way more co-ops than worker placement games, right? Just to pick a thing. But that's because I really, really like co-ops. So that's okay. But something that isn't getting a lot of love anyway, like a category or a type of game, and yet you've got 4 of those, you might not need them all.
Are we planning on covering Batman, Gotham City Chronicles? We already played.
Yeah, we played a prototype. That's the prototype we played of it. Yeah,
we'll probably, I would imagine we'll have more content when the actual production copy comes in. But I don't know. Really depends on a little bit more on the boss man, what he wants to do with it.
Somebody says, how big are your own game collections, and do you try to keep it at around a certain number?
That's the thing. Most of my collection are just simply residuals from reviews that I've done.
Sure.
Or that somebody else has done and they weren't keeping it, so I was like, hey, I'll take it.
Sure.
So my collection is probably much more bloated than it should be, and I'm finding that now because I'm boxing some of it up. So I've just recently I probably got rid of about 50 games.
Yeah, me too. Actually, brought in some games
to a yard sale that my church was doing. So I'm probably going to do that again here in the next couple of weeks. Not to a yard sale, but maybe take it to a library or something like that. So there's a lot of things that I have a lot more games than I will ever play ever again. So I'm in the process of whittling it down to those that are what I would consider my collection, not just leftover residuals from the workplace.
Right.
So
for me, depends. I try to keep it. It's not a really, really hard and fast rule, but I try to keep it. See, one of my rules, for example, is I have games in one room in my place, and I will not. I don't want games elsewhere. So that's one way to do it for me. That just works for me. If I'm like, man, something's got to go. If I would need to keep it elsewhere, that bothers me, right? It's about 400 games what I've got right now, but that's like what Tom's got about. I don't know about you, but probably something like that.
Yeah, about that.
It's a lot. It's a lot of games. Now, a lot of that also I use for work. You know, I can shoot reviews with it, or I can do comparison videos. Oftentimes a new game comes out, I'm like, oh, I have the old one for that. 10 years ago came out. I'm going to compare them. Stuff like that. So that can be helpful, but certainly lightening the load doesn't hurt.
How come we don't use the Dice Tower attachment for the Phalanx gaming table, the thing that goes right there? Well, I've actually have used it a couple times. We just don't use it here. Main reason that we don't use it more, I think, is because it actually opens out onto the table, and it doesn't actually do the purpose that a normal Dice Tower would, catching them and stuff like that. That's the main reason I don't use it more often.
Yeah, it gets in the way a little bit, and then I remove the plate that sits on it because it makes a little noise, unfortunately, as you put an elbow on it or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I usually pull it out and just set it aside. Sell off Tom's games while he's away. No, that's not right.
No sell.
What else have we got in here? A few other questions, and then we'll wrap it up. We've been going for about half an hour, which is solid. I've been known to bling out games and sometimes spend more money sprucing a game up than the original game cost, which I think is fine if you really, really love that game. Because honestly, it's probably going to get that game to the table more. It's better than buying another game of equivalent cost, is what I'm saying. Because then you're splitting your gaming your gaming time, rather, between two games. So I think that's actually a really valid way to do it. If you have a game you adore, man, yeah. Instead of buying a game, buy a cool insert. Instead of buying a game, buy metal coins. And then that game, when it comes to the table, you're going to get a fantastic experience. You're going to enjoy your gaming time. Yeah, you put more money into it, but it would have gone to a board game anyway, one that sits on the shelf.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great way to do it.
Is it becoming harder to be discerning in what you purchase when so many games are constantly coming out?
I mean, that's how math works, I think. Yeah, it is. It is. And again, always going back to that idea of, at the end of the day, I can't own everything. I can't buy everything. And really, I just can't consume everything is the way to go. You just got to keep reminding yourself of that, you know. You're not going to... It doesn't matter if you buy every game if you don't live 200 years to play them. So you got to break that cycle, you know, at some point. All right, anything else, folks?
Yes, James. It's not just you. The photos of Zee and I behind us do make us look like Kid and Play. That is correct.
We know. We've known since we saw them.
Yes. That was the first thought we had when we got them, as a matter of fact.
Yes. If we had been drawn with hats. But you know what? Piero, who is a board game artist extraordinaire.
Great artist.
Made those for us. So guess what? We're still going to use them.
Yep.
They're cool. All right, everybody. I think we're going to wrap it up. You feeling about that good?
Yeah, that's good.
thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for letting us make a little bit of fun of Tom here, which is, again, was all very much tongue-in-cheek. We're glad he enjoys his games. And we're glad you enjoy your games. Keep enjoying them. But, every now and then check in with yourself and see if you're still enjoying them or if they are now just enjoying the warmth of your abode.
Right.
Anyway, that's it for us. I'm Zee Garcia.
Sam Healy.
You've been checking out Dice Tower's BackTalk.
BackTalk.
We're out.
See you on the flip side.